There's a financial system running quietly in the background of everything you do. The wealthy understand it, and they use it every single day. Most people never even realize it exists until it's already shaped their whole life. What I'm about to show you might make you feel frustrated. It might make you think, wait, why didn't anyone teach me this? But more than anything, it can change how you think about money forever. Last time we talked about how owners and workers live under two different rule books. Today we go deeper into the actual playbook. And I'm going to show you how wealth doesn't just get created. It gets protected, multiplied, and passed forward. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. The tax code wasn't built with workers in mind. It was built to reward ownership. The moment you cross that line, even with something small, you step into a different universe. This is the core idea. Wealth compounds faster when you avoid taxable moments, not by hiding, not by breaking rules, but by understanding the rules that already exist. Once you see how this works, the entire system looks different. So let's cut straight to it. Wealthy people don't build wealth by constantly selling what grows. They build wealth by keeping the asset and using it as a platform. Read that again. They don't sell the assets that make them money. They hold them, protect them, and expand from them. That single habit changes everything. Instead of selling, they borrow against the asset to buy more assets. That's the owner mindset, quiet, systematic, and relentless. The system doesn't reset because they never force it to reset. Families do this with businesses, with stocks, and with real estate. But for normal people without millions sitting around, there's one doorway that's often the most realistic: real estate. Real estate gives you cash flow, and it gives you leverage. It often benefits from appreciation, and it comes with tax advantages that a paycheck will never give you. It's not magic. It's math, structure, and timing. Here's the simplest version. Imagine you buy a single-family home as a rental. Every month it produces a little cash flow. Maybe a few $100s at first. But then the hidden engine shows up. Depreciation. Even if the house is new, the tax code lets you deduct a portion of its value each year, as if it's wearing out. On paper, it can look like you're losing money, even while your wealth is growing. And over time, the property may rise in value. That's appreciation. Now you have multiple engines working at once. Cash flow, depreciation, and appreciation. Most people never stack them together on purpose, but owners do. Here's where most people slip. A few years later, that house you bought for $400,000 is worth $500,000. Most people think, wow, I should sell and take the profit. So they sell, and then taxes enter the room. That profit becomes a taxable gain, and suddenly the scoreboard changes. What felt like a win gets shaved down. You pay, you feel the sting, and now you have cash, but no asset. And without the asset, the engine stops. Your wealth journey hits a reset button. That's the trap. It's like scoring points and being forced back to the starting line every single time. You keep running, but you don't build momentum. Wealthy people understand one fundamental truth. Selling often creates taxation, and taxation is friction. The more friction you create, the harder it is to compound. So here's how an owner handles the same situation. The home is worth $500,000, and they don't sell it. Instead, they borrow against it. This is the key. Borrowed money generally isn't treated like income. So it's not taxed the same way income is. It's debt, yes. But it can be structured as a tool. Let's walk through the math in a clean example. You bought a $400,000 home with $80,000 down and a $320,000 mortgage. Over time, tenants help pay that mortgage down. Let's say it's now $280,000, while the property value rises to $500,000. Many lenders will let you borrow a portion of the new value through a refinance. If you can access 75% of $500,000, that's $375,000. Subtract what you still owe, $280,000, and you could access about $95,000 in cash. And that cash can arrive without triggering a sale. No, I sold an asset moment. No capital gain moment. Just a shift in structure. Now I know what you're thinking, but that's debt. And debt is bad, right? Here's the mindset shift. Owners don't fear debt as a concept. They fear debt with no plan. Debt becomes a tool when the asset supports it. If the asset's cash flow covers the payment, the debt isn't a threat, it's a bridge. It lets your asset keep working, while your compounding stays alive. So what do they do with that $95,000? They buy another property. That second asset produces cash flow, it creates deductions, and it can grow in value over time. Then the cycle continues. Buy, grow, and then borrow, buy again. And the momentum compounds because the engine never stops. They repeat this, building a bigger portfolio of assets. Assets that cash flow, assets that provide deductions, and assets that can be leveraged. And they do it while minimizing reset moments that slow them down. This strategy sometimes gets summarized with a provocative phrase. A cleaner way to say it is this: hold for the long term and borrow strategically. Keep the compounding working for you, instead of breaking it apart. You've seen versions of this at the top of the world. Some founders take very small salaries compared to their net worth. They don't rely on paychecks. They rely on appreciating assets and structured borrowing. And here's the mind bender. When assets are passed to heirs, tax rules can change the way our gains are calculated. In some cases, the cost basis is adjusted, which can reduce the taxable gain if the heirs later sell. That means wealth can transfer forward with less friction. The snowball keeps rolling, and the reset button rarely gets pressed. And no, this isn't illegal. It's the system doing what it's designed to do. For a long time, this felt like a game only the ultra-wealthy could play. You needed huge stock holdings or massive real estate empires to even start. Everyone else stayed on the outside, stuck on the paycheck treadmill. Earn money, get taxed, spend what's left, repeat for life. It's a system that keeps you producing, but struggles to let you compound. For many people, a shocking chunk of the year goes to taxes before wealth even has a chance. The difference between these two paths isn't intelligence. It isn't even work ethic. It's access to strategy and the willingness to learn the rules behind the curtain. Here's what changed. Real estate has always been one of the few vehicles that can bring regular people into the ownership game. You don't need billions. You need understanding, discipline, and a plan. And in recent years, certain tax rules have made the entry point even more interesting, especially for short-term rentals. Think of vacation properties and weekend getaways and hospitality-style rentals. The details matter. But the concept is simple. If you own a short-term rental and you materially participate in managing it, meaning you treat it like a real business, tax treatment may differ from a typical long-term rental. That distinction can open doors. It can turn paper losses into something powerful. This is where bonus depreciation often comes up. Bonus depreciation can allow you to accelerate deductions, pulling years of write-offs forward into year one. Instead of spreading depreciation slowly, you compress it. The result can be a large paper loss, and in certain situations, that paper loss can offset other taxable income. That's the moment that people's eyes go wide, because it feels like the rules just changed. Now let's be clear, this doesn't mean taxes vanish into thin air forever. It often means you're shifting timing, and using the system like a lever. And that is exactly the point. You take money that would have gone out the door, and you redeploy it into assets. You turn tax pressure into down payments, and down payments into compounding engines. Now your cycle begins. Cash flow builds equity. And equity unlocks borrowing. Borrowing buys more assets. And more assets create more deductions. More deductions can reduce taxes. And reduced taxes can mean more deployable capital. That's a snowball. It's not hype. It's a structure. And once it starts rolling, momentum becomes your greatest ally. So picture two games on the same field. In the workers' game, every yard gained gets trimmed by penalties and friction. You work harder, you run faster, but the finish line keeps sliding. In the owner's game, momentum gets rewarded. The more you gain, the more tools you unlock to protect and multiply those gains. It's not just a different income level, it's a different financial physics. For too long, people have treated the tax code like a punishment, like a maze designed only to extract. But for owners, the tax code is also a map. It's a list of incentives. Build businesses, provide housing, create jobs, develop communities, and the system often rewards you. When you align with incentives, the relationship changes. from collector to partner. The transition from worker to owner doesn't require a lottery win. It doesn't require a secret inheritance. It requires a shift in how you see the world and the courage to act differently. And at the heart of this is a concept so simple it hides in plain sight. Don't obsess over the flip. Obsess over the foundation, because the moment you sell, you often trigger friction, and friction slows compounding. The wealthy don't chase ends. They chase platforms, they hold assets, they let time do the heavy lifting, and they let inflation change the weight of debt over years. Then they tap value through structure, not through liquidation. In everyday culture, debt is portrayed as a monster. For consumer spending, it often is. But for owners, structured debt can be fuel when it's tied to assets that produce. When you borrow against an asset, you access value without surrendering the engine. You keep the compounding alive while unlocking capital. That's the bridge between paper wealth and practical momentum. So you might be thinking, is this only for billionaires? No. The strategy scales down when you start with something real. Real estate remains the great equalizer. It's one of the few arenas where someone with a modest starting point can use similar principles, just on a smaller board. And because property is tangible, it carries utility. People live in it, rely on it, and pay for it. And the tax structure often gives it a unique advantage. The property provides a floor through its real-world use, and the incentives provide a ceiling through financial leverage. That combination is rare. So here's the question. If the rules are learnable, and the doorway is real, why stay stuck in the old game? Why keep playing without the playbook? The zero-tax snowball isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a get-rich-forever framework, built on incentives, structure, and patience. It's about building a machine so aligned with the system that growth becomes inevitable. And as you stand at the edge of this understanding, remember this. The biggest barrier to wealth isn't always money. It's vision, and the refusal to learn the rules behind the noise. You have the playbook now. You can see the operating system. The only question left is whether you're willing to start and keep going. If this changed how you see money, hit like. It helps more people find this. Drop a comment and tell me, are you ready to start your snowball, or is something holding you back? And if you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.